Today's case is a BCG case, and I'm going to introduce our special guest. Abby Jin is a junior. She is going through the recruiting process for the first time, and she's done a good number of cases, but I'm going to let her give a bit of her background, what she's studying, what she's done for cases so far, and what she's looking forward to in the case today. Welcome, Abby.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jenny Rae, for the welcome. This is not a fake background. I'm sitting in a park by my house because my house is being renovated, so sorry if it gets a little bit windy. As Jenny Rae mentioned, my name is Abby. I'm a junior at UC San Diego, which is where I am now. I'm studying business and accounting, so pretty standard disciplines, and have done about 33 live cases so far. So if I know any of you on the call, hi. Hopefully I don't disappoint, but really happy to be here and excited to do this case. Would love to see some cool ideas in the chat too, just if anything I missed. But hopefully this is a good learning experience for me and for everybody here. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Abby, we're so excited to have you. Do you have any questions before we dive into the case today?
No questions.
Okay, well, let me just tell you what I've got planned. We have today a BCG case. We're going to do it round one focused. So I'm going to give you a maximum of 30 minutes to complete the case. We're going to target a separate section for creative, but the math is actually kind of hard to time through. So I'm going to time your opening, your structuring, the beginning and the end part of the case, and any creative questions that we end up diving into. But because of the natural back and forth inside BCG, I'm not going to be able to give you anything except for a big bulk time for what happens inside the middle of the case. During the case, my job is to guide you to the end of it, but I'm not going to give you feedback. After the case, I'll give you some detailed feedback about what should happen in each one of the sections, where you did really well, and where I think there's room for improvement. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I know some people have been having trouble hearing me, so is this better?
If you can hold up, yeah, hold it up, I think a little bit further, that would be awesome.
Like this? Yes? Yes, no?
There we go. That's amazing.
Perfect. Okay. Well, sorry if I'm a little bit slow. If my papers fly away, it's because I'm holding this. But
okay. Do you want to grab a rock or something else to hold your papers down?
Oh, my phone is here, so it'll be perfect. It's
okay.
Okay. Ready when you are.
Game on. Amazing. Great. So as we're about to get started, if everyone could just mute at the beginning of the session so that we have no background noise or anything else that's happening. It will just be Abby and I on voice. And then at the end of the case, we will have plenty of time for y'all to ask questions, both live and through the chat bar. Okay, Abby, I'm ready to get started if you are.
Yep, ready when you are.
Amazing. So our client today is a German luxury car maker. The luxury car maker wants to grow its business and is looking into selling cars in Pakistan. The GDP growth in Pakistan is 6% per year. There are over 200 million people in Pakistan, but the luxury goods market is quite limited. In fact, currently there's only one luxury car sold in Pakistan, which is the BMW. The cars are sold direct. There are no dealerships that carry BMWs, so each one is special ordered from Germany and brought into the country individually. For the purposes of this case, the luxury car market does not include resold cars, only new cars. Our CEO wants to find out if the company can break even in 2 years if it enters the market. What would you look at to help the CEO make a decision on this question?
Great. So this is very interesting. I'm not a car person, so we'll have to be asking a lot of questions here. But the first thing I want to do is just really quickly recap the case, make sure I have all of the facts, and then from there, I think clarify some gaps in my understanding. So our client is a German luxury car maker. They currently sell cars all over the world, but they're looking to enter the Pakistan market. A little bit about Pakistan, their GDP is growing at about 6%. They have a little over 200 million people, and they have a limited luxury goods market with only one luxury car, the BMW, that's currently residing there. Interesting fact about the Pakistan car market, the cars are sold directly, so no dealerships. They just purchase directly from the original car manufacturer. So, you know, my intuition tells me that could be something that we need to explore if we were to look into entering this market. We're looking specifically to break even in 2 years if we enter, and that's the objective that I have written down here. Is there anything that I missed, or did that pretty much summarize the facts?
I think you got everything that I needed you to have at this point, and I'm really excited to dive into the case now.
Sounds good. And just one quick clarifying question. Is the
Yeah.
only objective to break even within 2 years? Or is there anything else we should consider in terms of...
What else do you think that we should be thinking about here?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that stands out to me is just the distribution channels. So I'm looking at maybe we need to explore alternatives, or not alternatives, sorry, options to establish maybe some dealerships, or look at ways in which we currently sell cars to the end consumer. I know dealerships are pretty popular everywhere in the world, especially in the US, but I'm not too familiar with how a car manufacturer would be able to sell directly to the consumer in a Pakistan country. So would love to learn a little bit more about that once I lay out my thoughts.
That seems to make sense. Question, at what point do you think it would make sense to have a dealership established, or what metrics would you look for in order to include a dealership?
Yeah, so I know that for a dealership, we can consider that like an investment. So we need to look at the cash flows from that investment, the revenue we expect to get, as well as any costs of establishing a dealership there. If we have no previous experience in the Pakistan market, we don't have that cultural kind of ability to navigate that business environment. So we need to do a lot more due diligence into what kind of Pakistan customers would want our cars, given the limited size of the luxury market. And then on the cost side, we need to figure out what some fixed cost of investment would be, and then from there kind of establish whether or not it would look good from a financial standpoint.
I think hold on to that thought, and and make sure that you include it in your structure, because it would be something worth exploring what you think the kind of metrics and details around that would be. Not the primary question, but I think including it would be worthwhile.
Okay, sounds great.
Did you have any other questions?
I think that covers everything that I need to ask right now. So what I'm going to do is take a few moments and lay out my structure. If that's
okay. Sounds good. For those of you that are listening in, please build your own structure here. It'll be a good test to see how you can do it.
Jenny, quick question.
I won't answer questions until at the end of the case.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you could post the problem by any chance.
So no, I won't be posting it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
So I think sorry, I dropped the mic. I think I have here a pretty basic three-part structure that I'd like to use to tackle this problem. And we're looking specifically, as you mentioned, to break even in 2 years if we're looking at entry. So what I've done is I've divided my analysis into three major buckets. The first bucket is looking at whether or not this market is standalone attractive, looking at the Pakistani luxury car market. The second bucket I'd like to look into is whether or not our company is a good fit for this market. And then the third bucket is looking at the how. So that's where I would look into either organic or inorganic growth as the best strategy to penetrate this market. If we jump into that first bucket that I mentioned, is the market attractive on its own? I'd like to take a look at three things in that bucket. First, the industry. Second, the products in the industry. And then third, customers. So if we jump into industry, I want to take a look at the size and growth of the industry as a whole. So we're looking at the luxury car market in Pakistan. And I'd also like to understand the profitability of this industry, where it's expected to go within the next 3 to 5 years, specifically, I guess, within the context of our clients, within that 2-year time period. And from there, we can kind of begin to gauge how much market share we could capture, and then maybe potentially whether or not a break-even point would be feasible. If we look into the products, the second branch of that first bucket, I'd like to understand what types of cars that are typically sold in Pakistan. I know different cars have different functionality. So in the luxury market, do car makers typically sell the cars themselves, or do they sell other products as well that we could profit from? And then finally, I'd like to take a look at the typical customers. I'm assuming they're very high income, but I'd want to take a look more at what specifically that looks like and how those segments of customers are expected to grow so we can properly tailor any market entry strategy to that profile of customers. If we jump into the second bucket, whether or not we're a good fit for this market, I'd like to take a look at three things within this bucket as well. First, the company capabilities. Second, the customers. And finally, our sales and marketing capabilities. So I guess first in company capabilities, we're looking at distribution channels, any cash we have available for investment, and the strength of our brand. And actually, on second thought, I'm going to group the sales and marketing capabilities within that first branch. And then the second branch is looking at our specific customers and what type of customer we typically cater our products to see if there's a match with that this Pakistan luxury car market. And then finally, in that third bucket, I'd like to take a look at alternatives and risks of those alternatives, or specifically a market entry strategy. So I'm thinking whether we sell directly to the consumer or set up a medium to sell, either whether that's a dealership or a joint venture to sell through with a partnership with another entity already existing there. And then any return on investment and costs and profit that we need to take into consideration within that specific branch. With that being said, I would love to start off by understanding a little bit more about the standalone attractiveness of the Pakistan luxury car market. Do we have any information on the size of this industry and how fast it's growing? I know you mentioned that we have a GDP growth of 6%, so my assumption is that we're going to be growing at a little bit faster than that. This is a high potential market.
Yeah, when you're thinking about the size of the market, how are you thinking about actually measuring that, Abby? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if we're looking at the size of the market in terms of number of luxury cars purchased per year, I would probably start off with the population, and then I'd split that up into segments of population by income. Typically, only the top maybe 5 to 10% of the population are going to be able to afford luxury cars. I don't know what specifically this car maker is as far as our client goes, but that's what I would assume, about 5 to 10%. And then from there, kind of taking a look at what cars they currently drive, who would be most likely to purchase them, given what customers prioritize, whether that's functionality, image of the car, any other attributes of the car. And then from there, kind of assuming a percentage of that specific willing to buy this type of car, able to purchase this type of car market, and then divide that by the average lifetime of a car is how I would go about sizing that market.
I love that. So I've got some data that's actually a little simpler, but the way that you thought through it activated me to kind of give this to you. It's data about BMW, which is the closest data that we've got. And it's segmented into two types. You mentioned that there are people who replace the cars. But we actually do have some new entrants into the luxury car market as well. So we actually segmented those two pieces out. One of the pieces of data is that BMW imported and sold about 20,000 cars in this market over the past 10 years. The second is that the existing owners replace their car. What would you think a good replacement rate to use would be here?
I think once every 10 years is about standard.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I've got. So I think that's about right. And then, of course, there will be some that will do a lease or, something that's every 3 years. Leasing isn't an option in this market, so it makes sense that it would be a little bit longer. And then finally, there are new buyers every year that are entering the market. And so after going through the exercise that you just walked through, we identified that there would be 1,600 new buyers each year in the luxury car market.
Okay, great. So I think you gave me 3 major data points there, and I want to run through them to make sure that I got everything. So you mentioned if we're looking at BMW as a competitive benchmark here, I'm assuming that we can use BMW's numbers to calculate our market size, or potentially the whole market size, since they're the only player. So they imported and sold 20,000 cars in the last 10 years in Pakistan. The average car is replaced once every 10 years, and there are approximately 1,600 new buyers every year. Is that correct?
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at the market size for cars at the specific moment, or in general, maybe how many cars we're expected to have in the country every year. What's the specific time frame?
Tell me what you think.
Yeah, so I think since we can look at a yearly basis, so if we're looking at 20,000 cars already in the industry, we can take that and just estimate how many of those buyers, assuming that it's one owner per car, will replace their car every 10 years. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 20,000 and divide that by 10 to get the total number of car owners that will be replacing it every given year. So we have that 20,000 cars divided by a 10-year lifespan, and that's going to give us a number. And then the second thing I'm going to do after that is I'm going to take that number and add it to the number of new buyers that we have per year, and that should get us to the annual number of cars that BMW sells or expects to sell every year. From there, we can kind of be able to gauge how much of that market size we can capture, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so I want to jump back to the first step that I had wanted to calculate. So we have that 20,000 cars market size that are currently being owned. So we have 20,000 divided by 10. For the 10 years, so that's going to be 2,000 cars that are replaced every year. And then we're going to add that to the 1,600 new cars that are purchased every year, and that's going to get us to a total of 3,600 cars purchased per year of BMW. This number is a little small. 3,600 is not a lot of cars, but we're just taking a look at the stagnant market as is right now. So is the number of new buyers every year projected to grow as the years go on? And maybe alternatively, if the market's going to stay stagnant, what are the differences between BMW's car offering and our car offering, and how those compare with customer preferences? Just to get an idea of how we'd be able to compete with them in this market.
I want you to look at the data that we already have and see if you can extrapolate it to answer that question.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the GDP of Pakistan is growing at 6%. So I'm going to assume that the luxury car market is going to grow at least that fast.
I think you should double check that with the numbers that we already have.
The 6%?
With the number that we've already sold. Or not that BMW has already sold.
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. So
yeah.
Let me back up.
So instead of looking at the high level market, we can really just dial down into whether we think the market is growing based on whether we think that new buyers entering the market are entering at the same rate that they have entered over the last 10 years. And you have the data to do that.
Got it. Okay, so we know that 20,000 cars have been imported and sold in the last 10 years. So I'm going to take an average of that to see how many cars have been sold every year. So if we do an average here, that's just going to be the 20,000 cars divided by the 10 years. So we have the 2,000 cars per year on average that are sold every year. by BMW. Now, if we add that to or if we compare that to the new buyers of 1,600, that's a 400 car deficit. But I just want to clarify. So this new buyers is that, that's the only, so in any given year, the car sales will be a total of the existing car owners that will be replacing their cars as well as the new buyers, correct?
That's right.
Great. Okay. So if we're adding that 1,600 to the 20,000, we have 20,000 owners right now. If we grow by 1,600 owners every year, we can get that growth rate. Is that okay with you?
Seems reasonable.
Okay, sounds good. So calculating a growth rate, that's going to be that 20,000 existing owners plus the 1,600 new owners every year divided by the 20,000. That should give us a yearly growth, assuming that it's not going to change from year to year.
And it would change, obviously, because we're going to have this baseline growing. But I'm just curious as to whether, you kind of said, is it growing or not? I think you can answer your own question here.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll do the 20,000 plus the 1,600. So that's going to be 21,600 divided by 20,000. If we run the numbers here, that's going to be about 216 divided by 200. So let me just write it out here. I mean, if I divide that in 2, that's going to be 108 over 100, which is going to be about 1.08. So the market's growing at about 8% in this next year.
It's growing at 8% on the total. Mm-hmm. And then what if we thought about it another way? So how many cars were sold, would you estimate, around 10 years ago per year?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you that well. You said how many cars?
Yeah. Do you think were sold about 10 years ago?
Yeah. So if we're assuming maybe that every year there's 1,600 new buyers, what I could do is take that 20,000 cars and subtract 10 times 1,600, and that should get us to the market size 10 years ago. Is that what you're looking for?
Kind of, yeah. And I'm just saying, just ballpark it for me. Do you think that so here's what we've identified, right? It's growing. We have new buyers entering the market, and we have the old buyers that are likely to replace. This is good. But what I'm curious about is if we think the rate of growth is going to continue to grow, if we think that's going to be declining over time.
In the next 10 years, you're saying?
Yeah, we can call it in the next 10 years or even just in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, very qualitatively, I think this market will definitely grow. Of course, we just calculated that it's going to grow 8% in the next year. I guess if we look retroactively, if we look at the growth rate, the change in the growth rate from the last 10 years, maybe looking forward, if I were to ballpark that, let's see. I'd say it's maybe around the same, hasn't grown that much. I don't think that the market is really accelerating upward. Is that kind of aligning with the numbers that you have, or do you want me to run any specific calculations to kind of get?
Well, we're not going to need to calculate this in. I was really just asking for your interpretation. But what I'm noticing is that, maybe on average, if we sold 2,000 cars per year over the last 10 years incrementally new to kind of get up to that 20,000, it wouldn't have been straight lined. We probably sold more in year 5 and maybe even more in year 7 or 8. But it does seem like the number of new car buyers entering the market might be declining a bit. And then as we have that balance of luxury car replacements versus new cars, it seems like the importance is going to be on the replacements. I don't know that this will necessarily change our numbers, but I do think that it's important to note that it doesn't seem like we're selling more new cars a year than we used to. It does
right.
not.
I mean, if we're looking at the last 10 years, 20,000 cars, that's approximately 2,000 cars per year that we sold. Even if it fluctuated within those years, as a general trend line, the market's still growing. We still have new buyers, but the marginal rate of growth is slowing.
There we go.
It's decreasing.
Okay. Yeah, good. So again, I don't need you to factor that into the rest of the calculation, but I just wanted to kind of get a quick read on what you thought about what was going on there. What should we do next?
Yeah, sorry, was fiddling with the mic. Now that we've kind of looked at the market and we know that the market is growing a little bit slower than it was before, I think I want to take a look at our biggest competitor, BMW. And I'd like to understand what their capabilities are, what their competitive advantage is, how they're tailoring to customers to see if there's a potential entry point available for us here.
Okay, go ahead. Ask me for data.
Yep. So what's their current market share is 100%. What kinds of products do they sell, or what kinds of cars?
Just sedans.
Just sedans. And just to clarify, that's the 5-passenger standard cars. Okay. So that sounds like it's appealing to customers' a desire for functionality. So it's very interesting. Have we done any customer surveys, or do we know anything about what customers prefer in their cars in the Pakistan market?
What are you trying to get to? What will that lead you to? What would be the next question after that one?
After that one, then I'd want to know, how do our cars differ from BMW's cars? Can we tailor to a different customer segment? Can we tailor to different customer preferences? And within the customer base in Pakistan, what's the breakdown as far as preferences go in terms of percentages of customers that want either or?
We don't know what the market share will be for sure in Pakistan until we enter, but we have entered other markets. Vietnam is a similar use case for us. On average, in these other markets, including Vietnam, we gained 25% market share within the first year of those markets.
That's pretty significant. I like that number. Okay. So we can use, I guess, our past experience entering different geographical markets as a proxy for maybe how much we expect to grow in Pakistan or how much share we expect to get. So if we know that year of entry, that we have 20,000 or 2,000 replacement cars purchased per year, plus that additional 1,600 of new buyers. That means that total market size for the year is going to be 3,600 cars per year. And if we take 25% of that, that should get us to approximately what we estimate to be able to sell in that first year of entry. Does that sound good with you?
Sure.
So for 3,600 cars multiplied by 25% is just 3,600 divided by 4. So that's going to be 900 cars we expect to sell. And to really get an idea of how much this means for our business, I'd like to take a look at either the price that we can sell at, and then factoring in any variable costs and investment costs, tying that back to the original point of being able to break even. So what's the price that we'd be able to sell these cars?
Awesome. We don't know exactly, but we do know what BMW charges. They charge $80,000 US per car on average.
80,000 per car. Okay, great. So now I'm going to be able to calculate total revenue in the first year, and I'm going to also be able to calculate total revenue in the second year, since we're looking at a 2-year time period. So if we calculate revenue in year 1, that's 900 cars multiplied by $80,000 of revenue per car. That's going to be $72 million of revenue in year 1. I'm actually going to draw out a table here just so all my numbers are organized. We have year 1, year 2, revenue, or all this is forecasted. We're just using BMW's numbers. So the revenue in year 1 is going to be 72 million. And if we look at year 2, we're still going to sell at that BMW price, that $80,000 per car, but we're going to build on the market size from year 1 because we have an additional 1,600 buyers per year. So in year 2, let's see, year 1, year 2, we're going to have 25.
I think we can make a simplifying assumption, Abby, that it's the same. Like probably none of those new buyers yet will be buying additionally. So I think it's fair to assume that there will be just another 1,600.
Right. So it'll be instead of 3,600 cars in the market, it'll be 3,600 plus 1,600, right?
No, because it would be because what I'm saying is that 1,600 now is incrementally added to the 2,000, the 20,000 that, but there's probably no cars that are new. That new 1,600 haven't come up for a replacement yet. So we can just assume that it will be another 3,600 in the second year.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds good. That makes the math easier then. So our revenue from year 1 to year 2 will stay the same. And now I'd like to understand either what our profit margins are or what our cost breakdown looks like. Do you have that information?
What cost would you like specifically?
Yeah, I'd like to know fixed and variable costs. And if we tie this back to the break-even point, I'd like to know on the cost side, both the investment cost and any fixed and variable operational costs. And then on the revenue side, we already have that. So I'd like to take a look at costs.
Great. So I've thankfully got this a little bit simplified. I do have our initial investment cost. It's going to be $9 million to open this market for us. In addition, I have the per car costs. 3 of them are actually variable and 1 is fixed. Can you tell me just really quickly what you think the key variable costs would be here?
Yeah, variable costs, of course, include any shipping. So if we're not going to manufacture within Pakistan, we need to ship the cars. We also need to take into consideration any product manufacturing raw materials, any commission that we're paying to any sales and marketing teams, and then any direct labor that we're hiring to kind of sell these cars to the end consumer in Pakistan.
Okay, so we got 2 of those. I'll give you those first. The manufacturing costs per car are $20,000. These are all in US dollars. The transportation is 80% of the manufacturing cost.
Okay. So
we also have a third cost, which is customs and taxes. And so when we're importing directly, we're going to have the challenge of doing that. That's going to be 95% of the manufacturing plus the transportation costs. And then I mentioned that there was 1 fixed cost as well. And we just prorated this based on the number of cars that we already expected. It's about 10% of all of the above costs. So of the manufacturing plus transportation plus customs and taxes.
Okay, let's run some numbers.
Okay.
Great. So you mentioned that manufacturing costs per car, these are all per car costs. So manufacturing is $20,000, transportation is going to be 80% of $20,000, so that's going to be $16,000. Customs and taxes are going to be 95% of the $16,000 plus the $20,000, so that's going to be 95% of $36,000. So 95% of $36,000. I'm actually going to take 5% of $36,000 and subtract it out from $36,000, make our lives easier. So
sounds good.
5% of $36,000. Is going to be half of 10%. So 10% of 36,000 is 3,600. 10% of 36,000 is going to be 3,600. If we have that, that's going to be 1,800. So that's going to give us the 5%. And then if we subtract the 1,800 from the 36,000, that should get us to 34,200. So that'll be our customs and taxes costs per car. And then you said the fixed costs. The fixed cost per car is going to be 10% of all 3 of these costs combined. So if we combine the 20,000, the 16,000, and the 34,200, that's going to get us to 36,000 plus 34,200, which is 70,200. And if we take 10% of that, that's going to be 7,020 per car fixed cost. We're going to add up all of these costs to get the total per car costs, and then from there we can solve for break-even point.
Sounds good.
We have the 20,000, 20,000, 16,000. We have 34,200, which we already had calculated to be 70,200 total. Then we're going to add that to the 7,020 of that 10%. So that's going to get us total cost per car of 77,220.
You can round that to 77,000.
Oh, perfect. $77,000. And then just to clarify the prompt again, so you're looking at break-even point in 2 years. Are we looking at feasibility, or are we looking at how many units we need to sell in order to break even?
We're looking at feasibility. Right? Can we break even in 2 years?
Okay, sounds good. Let's see here. So if we run a calculation, in year 1, we make $72 million of revenue. In year 2, we make $72 million again. So total revenue over the 2 years is going to be that $144 million. And then if we look at costs, what I'm thinking here is we can take the profit over the 2 years cumulatively and then just divide it into the investment cost.
I like that process better.
To see if we can make that happen. So we know that the revenue over the year 1 and year 2 period is going to be 2 times 72. So as I said, that's 144 million. If we have costs of $77,000 per car, and we know that we're selling a total of 3,600 multiplied by 2 cars over the 2 years, that's going to be $77,000 of cost per car multiplied by 7,200 cars that we're selling over the 2-year period. So that should get us to our total costs. And if I just run those numbers really quickly.
You sure that we're selling 7,200 cars? Is that what you just said? Mm.
Yes, you mentioned that we're selling 3,600 cars. Oh, sorry, that's the total market size.
There we go.
So we're actually selling 25% of that, so 900 cars, and we're selling 1,800 over the 2-year period. My mistake. So we have that 1,800 cars multiplied by $77,000 per car, which should get us to total costs over the 2-year period. So I'm going to do 77,000 multiplied by 1,800. I just want to make sure my numbers are right here. So that gets me to 137.6 million.
Okay.
That's total costs. Now, if we subtract that out from revenue, we get profit. So profit is going to be, let's see, if we round that to 138 million, that's going to be a difference of 6 million. So 6 plus 0.4, $6.4 million of profit. And if we divide that into the upfront investment of $9 million, we'll get the break even.
Now, which one was higher, revenues or costs?
So revenues was higher per my calculation.
What was revenues?
It was $144 million.
You sure?
So I guess just cycling back, you mentioned that we're selling 900 cars at $80,000 a car. So I calculated that to be $72 million of revenue.
Okay.
And then I was doing the revenue over the 2 years.
Okay.
So I added those together and I got $144 million.
Great. Mm-hmm.
Is that okay with you?
Sounds good. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then we subtracted out the cost of 137.6 million to get profit of 6.4 million. And now that we have that break even, that investment of $9 million, we can take that 9 million and divide that by 6.4. Is it okay if I round the 6.4 to 6?
So what is that going to tell you? I just want to make sure you know what you're doing here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
when we do that number, what does that tell us?
So let's say that we get a number less than 2. I think that means that we'll be able to break even in less than 2 years.
Are you sure? What is the 6? What is the? And I think it's actually 5.4. Right, 138.6 and the 144.
Oh, I have 137.6. So
okay, what is the number represent? What does that represent? That 5.4 or 6.4? What does that represent?
So the 144 million, so that's going to be total revenue over the 2 years. The 138.6 is going to be total costs incurred for the cars that we're selling over the 2-year period. And then that profit number of, I think you said 7.4, 5.4, excuse me. That's going to be total profit over the 2-year period.
Okay, so how do we calculate if we're breaking even or not? When do we break even?
So we break even when profit is equal to 0.
Okay, and so what do we have to for profit to be equal to 0? How much profit in those 2 years would we have to get?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if we have that investment of $9 million, we have, if we amortize that over 2 years, that's going to be about $4.5 million of investment cost.
Mm-hmm. And so you're doing it in the aggregate for the 2 years. So how much do we have to have in profit? 9 million, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do we have it?
Good point. We don't have that. So we are about $3.6 million short. Profit is still positive, but we are still short of our goal. So I think we have a couple options here. A little bit of a fork in the road. One, we can take this loss and we can say, okay, we're still making a profit. These numbers, are maybe likely to change. We could do some more due diligence, but for now, assume that it's a good decision to enter this market. Or we could look at alternatives, such as establishing our own distribution channels, like that dealership we were mentioning in the beginning, or we could look at potentially a different market to enter or a joint venture to make sure that we can accelerate our sales growth in this specific Pakistan market.
Okay. Let me ask you specifically, if we could adjust the inputs that we just calculated to get us to a break even in 2 years, which ones would you think are the most likely to adjust?
Yeah, so cost optimization is a lot easier than trying to bolster sales. So I'd want to take a look at our cost breakdown. We have pretty high costs and at $77,000 per car. So I'd like to better understand the breakdown and compare that to competitors. So we have, that manufacturing and transportation costs per car. I'd like to understand what BMW is also doing within the cost segment.
Sounds good. Anything else?
Yeah, I think there's other ways we could do this as well. We could look at potentially raising prices, although my hypothesis is that doesn't sound like a great idea considering that the market's already so small and we're competing with one major player already established there. We could also look at increasing our sales and marketing campaign on the revenue side. We could look at selling complementary products. I know that for people that may not want to buy new cars when they replace new cars, we could potentially give them spare car parts or offer some kind of repair services that would bring in revenue for us while also enabling customers to form a relationship with us down the line in case they don't want to buy a whole new luxury car later on. And then, like I mentioned before, we could also look into that joint venture strategy, maybe even, it doesn't look like acquisition is likely, but it would depend on the cash we have on hand and anything within that vein as well. Could be potentially good things to look at.
Okay, awesome. Well, at this point, we're ready for a final answer. What do you think we should do? Enter, don't enter, make changes to our plan. What's your final recommendation, Abby?
Yeah, so this was a very interesting case, so thank you so much for this one. My final recommendation is that we should enter this market. And I have a few reasons for that. First of all, this market is still growing. Even though it's growing a little bit slower than it was before, that doesn't mean that this will be a permanent growth rate. So I think there's still a lot of upward potential here, especially since we have only one other competitor competing with us. I think the second reason is that we can capture 25% market share in the first year, which is pretty significant. And without even taking into consideration how that would grow, we'd be able, through that 25% market share, to get profits of about $5.4 million in those 2 years. Now, I know that this falls short of our original goal, and I know that we're a little bit short of breaking even in that 2-year time period, but I think that if we're looking at this from a very high level qualitative perspective, there's a lot of room for this market to continue accelerating upward. And I think even if we break in within 3 years, which is the current trajectory that we're heading towards, it could still be a very profitable investment, albeit just a little bit delayed on the break-even return. Of course, some next steps to consider is definitely a risky market, so I would want to do a little bit more due diligence into the numbers, make sure that we really can assume that we can capture that 25% of the market and that our forecasts are properly verified in order to mitigate any risks of potential failure or not being able to capture the market that we had originally hoped.
Okay, great. Good job, Abby. You can relax. Well done. How did that feel for you?
Honestly, I was a little bit flustered. It wasn't my best performance ever, but I think if I just maybe taken like 2 seconds and stepped back, it would have been a little bit better on the numbers.
I think that's some really great feedback. I'm going to go through and give you some insights as we went through the case. We ended up taking almost 40 minutes to do it. It may have felt harder than you were initially anticipating because when I got through the initial piece, I felt like you were going to do a really good job. So I actually decided to modify it, push a little bit deeper into it, and make it more of a second round case because I wanted you to get a lot out of it as we were going through it. And so what I did
Thank you.
I added in some bonus stuff. And, as the interviewer, I was really pushing you you probably felt this, but I was pushing you to read out the insights before you did the math. I was pushing you to give me a general direction before kind of waiting until the end. And that's one of the big differences in a second round case with BCG that I'm looking for versus a first round, is that I'm looking for you to call it before you need to call it, right? You call it, then you verify. You call it, then you verify. And so I'm going to go through each section of the case and give you detailed feedback. You can feel free to ask questions as we're going through this. And then also at the end, if you have any questions, I'm happy to listen to those as well. After that, we'll open it up to the floor for people to ask either you questions or me questions. So first of all, let me just go through the timing and the structure of the case. As I mentioned, I didn't split out what was happening inside the math because that piece was a little bit too kind of jumbled together, right? It's like gathering data and then doing the calculations. And so I just did the beginning and the ending and the creative question. So at the beginning of the case, your introduction was about 3.5 minutes. It was really good. The only thing that I would tweak in the introductory piece is that you started out with a negative statement. You said, I'm not really a car person, which deflated. I think what you were trying to do is set my expectations that you might say something a little silly at some point inside the case, but you did not demonstrate that you weren't a car person as we went through it. You were totally with it. And I think you really need to push yourself to say something positive. This sounds like a problem that I have never thought about before, but I have familiarity with cars, right? Something that kind of is like giving me confidence instead of breaking my confidence down. What I'm imagining when you say I'm not a car person is that I put you in front of a client at BMW and you say that and they fall apart, right? You're like, why did we staff this kid who knows nothing about cars on a car case? So just beginning with that posturing is a very important part at the beginning. However, I thought your recap was super fluid, very story-oriented. I felt like overall, you did a great job of demonstrating that you had proficiency with the business problem at the beginning of the case. And so that would be really my only key takeaway. When you asked the question, which was included in that time, about that 3.5 minutes, it was kind of not really a question. You were just like musing out loud, I think, right? You know, you kind of said, it's interesting that only BMW is in the market. And it's also interesting that they have no, local sales. And I think that would be a really big opportunity. And I loved that you said that, but you never asked me a question. So that's kind of why I asked you a question. And then we got off onto this little, almost like mini tangent at the beginning. So just make sure at the beginning that your wording, when you come up with insights like that, I love it. Just ask me the question afterwards, right? Are we open to having a different kind of distribution than BMW has? Would we be willing to set up local dealerships or a partnership with a local dealership? Would we be open to considering local manufacturing, right? So there's give me the musing, but then add that detail in. Okay. Overall, though, I thought that was good. Your structure was a little funky for a BCG case. This felt like a McKinsey issue tree. I don't know if you've read or watched some of Victor Chang's stuff, but it felt like straight out of Victor Chang. And it did not feel like this was meant to solve this problem. It took you 3.5 minutes to build it.
Oh, wow.
Quietly. And then it took you almost 3 minutes, about 2 minutes and 50 seconds to report it back out. And so that was way too long for a case like this. And I actually have a podcast coming up kind of soon called The Issue Tree is Dead for virtual interviews. In parentheses is for virtual interviews. And I think you did an awesome job of demonstrating why, because you actually were like, and in that branch, there's a baby branch. And you should see what I wrote down on my paper. I could not follow it after a point and I just gave up. That's obviously not how you want to engage your interviewer there. So you need to simplify your structure and you need to make it just data oriented. I'm going to need this data. I need to know what the size of the market is, how many German luxury cars there are. I need to know what the percentage is of those luxury cars that are that would be sold by BMW and by us. In order to figure out the number by us, I'm going to go to the second category, customers, right? What kind of models of cars do customers want and what is our breakdown? Give me the data only in a BCG case that you're then going to go collect. Make it your data playbook and give me one level of category and then one level of data. You gave me a 8 or 9 actual category structure all baked together, which is why I think it took you so long and why we, after the first question, never used it again. right? So and in BCG, one of the things I'm going to test for you in a final round is like, was your structure the playbook that you used inside the case? So again, in a first round, I would have been like, she wasn't wrong. Like a lot of those things are good ideas. You know, she's adorable. In the second round, I'm like, look, I have to choose whether I want her on my project or not. I need somebody who's really linear here. So I really want to make sure that you understand the difference between those and just go ahead and incorporate that in your first round performance.
Okay.
So any questions about that structuring piece?
Yes. So is that only a BCG thing? So how does I know McKinsey loves the issue tree. What about Bain?
So McKinsey doesn't love the issue tree in virtual environments because they can't see anything that's happening. So I would say that you still would have been well served to do that same kind of structure for Bain and for McKinsey, because I would know in each one of those situations, the analysis that you would do would answer my question. And so you're welcome to make it a 2-minute version of it. If you come up with that linear structure in a minute, add some other contextual detail, right? Add me a category of local distribution, like set that up and tell me exactly what you would need. But I'm just really pointing out that you had like concept, and in some situations concept at the third layer. And all of those three we're never going to get to no matter what kind of MVP case it is. We're going to get to data inside categories. Those are the only two places that we're going to get to inside the case. So I think that that structure would work well in all of those situations. It's one of those big changes that we have to make in a virtual environment. And the second thing, I don't know that you could have done this with the complexity restructure in the first place, but you have to number everything out. Number one category is, and you did that well. And then when you went into the first one, you said number one is the industry, number two is the product, number three is the customer. And then it went haywire. You were like, and then here's like 7 things inside here. Or maybe they were only 3 and you were just explaining them. I actually don't know when you were moving on from point 1 to point 2 to point 3. And so you want to keep that like incredible numbering going. You might even want to number them inside your structure to cue you to do that when you're in this verbal environment. Okay. Good. So everything was there. You needed about half of it and it needed to be all numerical. Those are my key takeaways from the structure piece. Then when you went into the math, I thought you did an excellent job of gathering. I thought your speed and your fluency with math was incredibly proficient. I loved that you stated assumptions as you went through when you caught them, right? I'm going to assume that this reflects 1 owner per year, not multiple drivers, right? There were things that you did when you went through it. There were a couple of times when you tried to do math before you needed to, and that's really where I just wanted to reorient that math for second round to be like, okay, what am I looking at here, right? Let me make sure that I'm setting this up correctly. I felt like there was a lack of structure inside your math that you could have wowed me with. I knew it was there because I watched you deliver on it, but I wasn't hearing it beforehand, so you weren't kind of building my confidence. And then I think you would have gone through a more linear process. I actually think you would have maybe caught a shortcut, which in this case is to just do the margin per car and then divide that into the break even and figure out the number of years. And so you were doing actually like more complex calculations because you were trying to just calculate. And so in a second round performance, I actually still really thought you did a good job, but it wasn't great. And I would hate for you to walk away and be just right on the border, right? You're so close. You have to get this offer when it comes.
Thank you.
So the way that you do that is just tell me like, okay, what I'm going to need is the market size. And what you did there is you told me, here's the data that I would need before you asked for it. What you did for all the other ones, you was like, well, what about the price? Instead of saying, okay, now we need to figure out the margin per car. And right. And that's where putting that into your structure is going to help you. It'll give that exact playbook that you can just go back and follow again. But that's where we were losing it. And that's why the math in total took us 30 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Actually 28 and a half minutes, 28 and a half total minutes. And that probably could have taken us 12, I think, by the time I was asking some of the sideline questions. It was really 3 parts of math, which I would give 15 minutes for, but I think you could have taken about 12 to do it. And so anyhow, I think that could have been about half the time. And then we could have spent a lot more of our time talking about, for me, what are the ways that I really test my top candidates, which is the next piece. Okay. Overall, I just really want to compliment you on the speed and the fluency of the math. I felt like you understood it. I felt like you did a really great job across the board there. But I did feel like there was room for improvement. The way that you practice it is just go back through it again now that you have all the data. and then go back after you do the math and rewrite your structure, right? What are the things inside my structure that I should have thought about gathering? And that will, going backwards inside a case like that, helps bring clarity for the next time you do a market entry. Great. And then the final thing was your creative question that I asked, right? What numbers would we flex? That came across like just a verbal download, right? Just a waterfall of verbalness. I don't want that. So I think you were feeling like there was time pressure, but I still want to see some control from you there. And so what you would do instead, what I wrote down was expect to break even, what the alternatives are, different markets to enter your JV. Actually, I think that was maybe for your closing. I didn't even write down what you said in the creative because I couldn't really follow it super clearly. And so that's, again, in a virtual environment, you might have been writing things down, but it just came across as like, well, we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do this. And instead of being like, okay, let me look at the volume, at the data that we have again, right? What we have is the price point. We also have the transportation costs. We have the import costs, and then we have the taxes. Finally, we have this, overall SG&A. Look, we could bring the SG&A down, but that's not going to make a major difference. We need to look at the big cost categories. So could we lower price? Sure. Do we want to? Maybe not. And then maybe talk with me more detailed about what we would do there. Maybe we should sell SUVs, right? Differentiate ourselves through a different product. Maybe we're going to have similar other numbers. Maybe they won't be percentages, but we're going to get a higher price point in the first place. And so right. And so you kind of could probe into those once you've laid out the structure again. Is that clear?
Yes.
So what I would have wanted for you there is to basically
I was rambling there.
Yeah. So control yourself by writing down the categories of creative first. So let me just say it out loud. I'm going to write down my categories. So category 1 is price. Category 2 is transportation costs. Category 3 is customs. Category 4 is manufacturing. And I'm going to think about ways that we could adjust each one of them and then prioritize which one makes the most sense and then go back through. For pricing, we could change the product mix, maybe selling SUVs or higher luxury priced items. Yeah. So then you kind of go through each one of them and you anchor those like that. But write it down and write down your categories first. Then in your final, go ahead. Did you have a question there?
I was going to say, I usually end up writing it out, just writing 4 buckets, I think I would take a look at. But if I'm crunching on time, is it worth my time to say, okay, category 1 is this, category 2 is this, or should I just
always to write the categories? To then go into detail underneath the categories isn't as necessary. But yeah, if I would have just known what the categories were, I could have followed everything else you said more clearly, and I would have been oh, she's structured, right? Which is really, in a BCG case, I'm just going to rate you at the end. Are you structured? Are you proficient at solving the problem? Are you a good communicator? And I'll do that in just a second for you. The final step was the closing. And I actually find it kind of odd that you were enter the market. Because I told you the mission was that we were supposed to break even in 2 years. And then you were enter the market. And so your closing delivery was really good. I just found the actual choice of what you recommended to be a little bit unclear. So I liked the recap piece. I liked the recommendation piece, but that part I would have tweaked. I loved your next steps. And so I just felt like the whole thing flowed out of actually a different recommendation. So it felt like it was almost doubling back on each other a little bit. So I think the delivery was fine. I think the structure of it was there. Again, I would just really reflect on going back to the mission of the case and making sure that you've responded to it. That about 80% of the cases, the answer is going to be yes, but that 20% that are no, I don't want you to just force it into a yes. Where the data doesn't lead us there.
I mean, I think where my argument was going to go there was, even though we don't break even in 2 years, we'll break even in 3, and there's still profit to be made here. So I think maybe we could still enter, even though it doesn't meet our criteria. We just have to wait maybe 6 months.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have dinged you for it, and I still liked you. Okay. So, but all that I was saying is that I think you would have wanted to have some more verification that we could have gotten that, and maybe a better creative structure beforehand. I think that the way that we're going to do this is by batch transporting them. So we're going to do 1 transport a month. Gosh, if we just get those costs down by $5,000 per car, then we break even easily in the 2 years, right? So I was looking for something tying the actual performance to the metrics that we were looking for.
Got it. Okay.
And so, good. Yeah. So then my final score, so basically BCG scores you on the 3 core categories, right? Were you structured? Was it, how was the problem solving? And then what was the communication like? And so I would have given you like, out of, if we called it a 4-point score with 1 being the highest and 4 being the lowest, I would have given you 2s on the structure and on the problem solving, which is really good. That would have gotten you already into the final round, but it's not perfect, right? It's not like what somebody at BCG would do currently. So that's just where I think your biggest opportunity is really like making the structure super clear and making sure that you do that insight before data piece. And then the communication, you were a 1. It was fantastic across the board. And so, so again, congratulations. I thought that was a really good case, and I hope that you found that feedback valuable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I also appreciate that you made it a little bit more difficult, so that I could get some good pressure, some fire under myself to be better. So the structure and problem solving, you'd give me a 2. It wouldn't be enough to pass me on the final, but it would be enough to get me.
It would just leave you in the yellow zone, right? There's a green, a yellow, and a red zone. You wouldn't have been in the red zone. You wouldn't have been in the definite no's, but you wouldn't have been in the green zone. And so you might have gotten an offer and you might not have gotten an offer. And that is just the worst place to be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be in the definite no's either, but if you're going to be so close, I just think you have a couple of very fixable things that are going to be, that you just need 1 or 2 good practice partners to really push you on those, to say like, I actually couldn't follow your structure. Just go back and do it again. Or or like in the math, like, let's just go back and do it a second time and see if I timed you the first time, it was 11 minutes. Like, let's see if we can make it faster a second time. Right. And just kind of like run through so you can kind of rejigger that process a little bit.
Got it. Okay. And that last point where I wasn't able to conceptualize the dividing like just comparing the profit to the break even.
Yeah.
Now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, how did I end up doing that? But if I made that mistake like, if I was just so bogged down in the math and I was looking at it and like, it was just crazy.
That was why you got like a 2 instead of a 1, or like the kind of second highest number for that number for BCG, because that I wanted to see that the insight piece was really strong. And so I felt like you were so fluid with the numbers, but I wouldn't want you to bring me a number and be like, here you go. I would want you to be like, break even or not break even, right? I really wanted you to go all the way to think about how to answer that. And so you can pause a little bit when you get that moment, like on the insights. It's not like McKinsey where you can say like, can I take 20 seconds to plan the whole thing? But you can certainly say, let me just look at it for a second. Like, you had moments to do that inside the case, and that might help as well.
Okay. Good to know.
Awesome.
Well, okay. I think that's everything I have right now.
Okay, awesome. I know that a couple people had questions, so I just wanted to answer a few of the ones that have come through in the chat bar, and I also just want to make sure that everybody's questions about the insights and the feedback were answered. So, Idil, I think you said, did anyone calculate how long it would take to break even? It's about 3.3 years with current revenues and costs. So like Abby said, that's not crazy. It's aggressive to say that we want to break even in 2 years, but it is risky. The main risk, which we didn't identify in our discussion, is that like, it would be super easy for BMW to just drop their prices by 4%, right? We're at really small margins right now in the case that 3% or $3,000 out of the 70, out of the like 80,000 is a really small percentage of the margin. So they could just wipe us out by dropping the price to like $74,000 or $77,000 even, then we don't have any profit whatsoever. So there are some challenges. I'm thinking even about the competitive reaction. Yeah, run it.